Welcome to Cyber Frontier, bringing you the latest news, trends, and hottest topics that focus on advances in cybersecurity and cyber industry economics. Our expert yet down-to-earth hosts make cybersecurity straightforward. They ask the tough questions and make this challenging topic something that everyone can understand. Our candid approach lets guests open up on topics we would all like to see addressed. You can find us on the web at newcyberfrontier.com. That's www.newcyberfrontier.com. Now join today's host as he introduces the topic for today's New Cyber Frontier.
Welcome to New Cyber Frontier. In studio with me here today I have Don Brown. So welcome. I'm glad that you came into the studio. I always love to have people face to face. But Don is the CEO of Springs Hosting, CEO and founder of Frontier IT and Springs Hosting, which is, we're in Colorado Springs, rather in this area, very formidable, offering service for IT solutions and managed service providers. So welcome, Don. Thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
Definitely. So, and also I worked extensively with your wife at Colorado Tech. Great woman. So always, we've been trying to get you on now for a year, maybe two, huh? And just finally caught you at the time when you come in. But today I thought a great show would be with your kind of vast experience of pulling together and supporting so many companies in this area through the growth of their companies from 0 employees, startups, and then migrating through different stages and what they need and what they might not think of for IT services.
Okay.
So, first of all, give me your background. How did you get to where you're at? How did you start out? What made you get into running your own business and the hosting business?
It was never the plan.
Never the plan.
Never the plan.
Never is.
No. My undergrad was electrical engineering. The plan was to go work for Intel. And unfortunately, they left Colorado Springs, and that left me trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I ended up working for US West for a while, and I even taught Unix Linux a while. Worked for CDE for a while, and
CDE?
Colorado Department of Education.
Okay.
Yeah. Then I found my own place in there, primarily back then with hosting. Started out of my basement, no less, and it was one of the few folks, I suppose, when the electricity went out. It powered all the machines, but it also powered my fridge, my TV, and everything else in the house.
So wow, back in those early days, what was you said the power went down. How often what was your uptime at first?
Oh, I don't know back then. It was all sitting in a residential house at the time. I might have had at best I had 100 customers back then. It was just me trying to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah. Did you every time you had downtime, did you end up losing customers, or how would you keep that balance? I guess I'm asking.
I don't remember having a lot of downtime. I suppose that might blank that stuff out too, because it would be a dark day when that kind of thing happened. But looking back, I can remember the first servers that we put up. I say we. It was just me back then. The
royal we.
Yeah. We had a little 40 kilowatt generator sitting outside of the house. I quickly outgrew that by outgrowing the bandwidth. I can remember it was 2 T1s coming into that place, and that was it. Later we had a T3. We started bouncing off the top of that, and then we went hunting for space. And we finally found a colo provider that we used for several years until we got big enough to buy our own building and build out our own space. And we did that in about 2008. So it's been about 12 years.
Yeah, you don't hear too much about those early stages. There's always these big companies or settled companies, and at one time we were in the garage, right? Yeah. We did use all my computers for heat. We didn't turn the furnace on all winter.
It would warm things.
We opened the windows in the middle of the winter, right? Yeah. Those type of things. But you see a lot of companies come through the door, and a lot of local companies, which gives you insight into kind of the local strength of IT and growth in this area. And we thought it would be great to just kind of talk about what companies do at what sizes. So if you're a startup and looking at, I'm ground zero, I got to start somewhere, which, I've been a startup, my own practice for the last This is our third year now, so we're feeling bigger now.
It goes by fast.
But the first stage, and then migrating to the second. But we're going to go through kind of that progression to here on today's show, and get some input from the experts that are seeing lots of people come through at each one of these different levels. Be right back when we get from our sponsors.
Cyber Resilience Institute helps build strong cyber communities designed to prevent members from attack. Like building a neighborhood watch, it takes coordination and a sharing community to protect our identities and valuables in the virtual world. Typically, we hear that organizations know they need to do something to protect their cyber assets, but don't know where to begin. Let Cyber Resilience Institute help your community create an action plan. Cyber Resilience Institute will build your community or business marketplace so that it is designed to support a collective cyber defense. Contact them for more information at cyberresilienceinstitute.org.
Welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. In the studio here today with Don Brown. We appreciate you being in the studio. A CEO from Springs Hosting and founder of Frontier IT as well. So now we're talking about sizes of companies and how they scale, what services they need. And I've been in that the last 2 years plus of 0 to 1, we'll say. And most of my managed services are all virtual. You know, I don't have a physical office at all. I could take this computer and the computers that some of my contractors have, and we could work from wherever. Things we need at that size was one, websites, which we have through Springs Hosting, email providers, right? And then file shares and Word software, so code repositories. So companies going from 0 to 1. What do you recommend to them, or when
0 to 1 folks?
Yes.
Everything should be in the cloud. So whether you're Office 365 or G Suite, there's your email solution, some sort of file share that you're going to use online. The only thing you're going to keep locally is going to be your machine.
So you could walk away from it. If it fell down the steps, it's dead. New machine, do it all
You're
the same
pushing your
thing.
backup somewhere. You know, if you're going to have that backed up, or if you're going to store everything in the cloud. You know, common thing is if you use, I don't know what you use, but if you use like Office 365, you might be using OneDrive or Teams or something, and you're storing those files there.
So yeah, I think we use ShareFile, which is a Citrix.
Yep.
It's an Amazon Cloud service.
Very
But
similar to OneDrive.
I pretty much don't save anything on my local machine that doesn't go up there. I do some working copies of things here locally, and I have my whole team same thing. It's like everything goes in these folders that you're working on. What you're working on goes here, and it's all there. And to me, it doesn't even matter. Like, they're contractors for most of my, everybody right now on my team. They don't have any equipment that, other than their own equipment.
Yep.
So, and that's the way to go, right? Until what size? What's the turning point when you say, well, we've reached the next phase? And I'm all ears right now.
Well, so interesting point on that one is you want to stay that way as long as you can. I don't know if there's a turning point for your stuff being in the cloud, as much as there is the needs of your company. Let's say you were a defense contractor and you had a program for your accounting called Deltek. You have to have that locally or sitting somewhere in a cloud that you can access, but it's not an application out there for you. So you may reach a size where that's going to stay in-house with you. You're going to have a server, that kind of thing. I don't know how big you're going to be. It sort of
So it's
dictates on what it
usually
is.
like the first domino that says, I can't have this somewhere else, it has to be on-prem, that makes that decision for you?
Yeah, and a lot of that stuff, I mean, there's gaps in there. For example, I would make the case that it doesn't necessarily have to be on-prem. You can find a local co-location provider where you can put it, and then run an EPL or an MPLS, a private connection internet, back to wherever your office is, and it'll look like it's in-house, but yet it's sitting in a data center
So
somewhere
it's basically
secure.
like your own cloud that you leased in space, like
You
it's
could look at it
Springs
that way, sure.
Okay.
What size you hit that, it could be anything. I think the other thing, though, is where you're getting that support at for your machines. When you're starting out and you're by yourself, you are your support, right? So anything that goes wrong on that machine, what do you do when your Outlook application doesn't work? What do you do?
I'm the tech.
You're
That's
the
what I
tech,
do,
yeah.
yeah.
And as you grow and you get more employees, eventually they don't want to be the tech, and you don't want them spending time with that either. So you're going to look to outsource that service to somebody out there, who hopefully is going to take care of your employees, and when they have a problem, respond quickly and fix it quickly, so you can maximize their time on their equipment.
So things like, we have our email through Springs Hosting, and right now I just don't delete anything off the email server.
Gotcha.
But at some point,
You're going to run out of space.
I'm going to run out of space, right? And I already have at points I think bought more space and said, yeah, just update that to 15 gigs or something.
Sure.
But that service, you keep growing in the cloud. Is there at some point when you have to, what's the next size, I guess, category when you say, time to make your own network, time to have your own email server?
Well, I don't think you ever have your own email server these days. Those days are long.
So you just keep paying for keeping your emails forever? What's
Not
your thoughts on
necessarily.
that?
So you can archive those emails, and that's what I would tell you is archive them, push them onto your share file, so you can dump things that are older than 3 years or something like that.
So 3 years you think is a magic number you could archive?
It's a good
after
number
that?
for me. It's kind of what I do.
Okay.
I can still go back and get them. So if some old contract pops up and somebody says, here's what was said 5 years ago, I can go find that email and I can see what I said, because I'm not going to remember, 5 years later.
Yeah, but you're probably right. 3 years might be a good point to think of. Okay.
Yeah, right now if you're using like the services sitting on Springs Hosting, then you're using POP servers and things. It's probably it doesn't have a ton of frills or anything, amazing, right? So most people will make that next step. They'll move to something like G Suite or Office 365, and there's a whole lot of storage on those. So you're going to jump from where you might have 15 gig to you're going to jump to 50 or 100 gig on Office 365. So then you're going to get all those extra tools that you used to have when you had a localized Exchange server. We all remember those days. I think out of all the customers I have 2 customers that have local Exchange servers, and that's it.
Okay. So that's all total Microsoft, right? So you wouldn't run a Microsoft 365 service for anybody?
Well, we do.
You do?
Yeah, so we're a tier 1 provider for Office 365. So we
Okay.
have a ton of customers that purchase those servers through us, or those services, excuse me.
And that's running on-prem in your location?
Negative.
No. Okay.
Yeah, it's running in Microsoft's cloud. There's zero difference in cost. The only real difference is when they have a problem, they get to talk to us. So we get paid out of the money you're paying Microsoft to provide that tier 1 service for them.
Interesting. So now, at like 50 or 100 people, you would say migrate maybe to that type of approach, and you could take the same, like all the email accounts that I already have and migrate them all over.
We absolutely can. And I don't know that there's a mark once again on that where it's like, once you hit 50. I have customers that have 1. They want the services on that Office 365. Maybe because, they want it to sync between their phone and their laptop. And when they delete it in one place, they don't want to have to go delete it again somewhere else. So they want that sync.
That central
between them.
synchronization. So we had said 50 people, under 50 people is a benchmark. If a company rolls over 50, what things might they think about that they hadn't thought before?
So let's say a company that's 25, 30 people, they're outsourcing their IT support, their help desk. When they start to get above that 50 mark is when they can look at potentially insourcing their tier 1.
So tier 1 is the person that does help desk support for their computers.
For the
all
workstations.
Their employees'
Absolutely.
computers.
Yeah.
So before that, you guys offer that service, so managed service provider offers that?
Yeah.
Do you go on location to?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and would most of those, would you say, okay, only for this location, like an office, or distributed? Do you support distributed workforce?
So we have customers all over the place as far as in different states and whatnot. But the truth is, if we're going to come on site, it's going to be up and down the Front Range. So we support all the way down south to Pueblo, and we support all the way up just on North Denver.
So other than that, it's pick up the phone and talk to us and you'll help them.
Pretty much. I mean, if there's something outside of that, I mean, we have customers in Chicago. We will fly out there if there's something that's going on, but you don't want us flying out there when you can't get Outlook to start.
Gotcha. So at about 50 people, it might be economical to hire somebody to do all your images, your new machines and stuff like that.
Long story short, we have software that we use that allows us to remote to that person's machine regardless of where they are in the world, and we can see the same thing you're seeing on your screen. So you can tell us what's going wrong, and my guys can fix that without physically being there. And 99 times out of 100, that's how we're interfacing with customers. We don't have to physically drive to them. One of the things I always explain, though, is that whether it's on-site or whether it's remote, it's a fixed fee, same cost for us as far as how we,
You handle it. Okay.
Yeah.
So now, if we're getting bigger, and we're over 50 people, we've made kind of the changes. We've hired somebody to do our IT, and we keep growing. What's kind of the next time or size, scale, turning point, and what would that consist of?
So once you've gone over that 50, and then let's say you're getting up to that 100, I'd say the next big jump is going to be when you get up above that 200 or 300 and you're up closer to the 500 range. You're going to look at in-housing or insourcing your systems administrators too. These are the guys.
Okay. So let's take a break here from our sponsors. Right back about the 2 to 500 range.
Okay.
What might be needed at that point? Be right back.
Murray Security Services are your cybersecurity experts with decades of experience providing professional training services for our clients in various industries. We offer professional training and certification in areas of cybersecurity, safety, health, and environmental services at our academy. Our in-person and online training provides a collaborative environment where students can interact directly with instructors through live chats or in private classrooms. Visit murraysecurityservices.com for more information.
All right, welcome back to New Cyber Frontier. On today, talking to Don Brown, the CEO of Springs Hosting and Frontier IT. And we're going through the progression of growth of companies and what managed services they use. And right before the break, we were talking about that next jump from 100 people up to like 200 to 500. And that was another range where you might, at 100 you were bringing in somebody to do your 50, bringing in somebody to do your IT, your images, taking care of all the employees' computers. But now at this next range, you're bringing in what you call a Tier 2. Explain what that means.
So a Tier 2 is typically a systems administrator that's maintaining and updating your servers.
Okay.
Whether the servers are in a cloud, like Azure or AWS, or whether the servers are on-prem, they're taking care of that equipment.
So would that include like user accounts at this point, or would you already be kind of at that point, somebody managing an Active Directory?
User accounts and Active Directory. While the systems are being set up by the sysadmin, those changes to the Active Directory are really your Tier 1.
Okay.
So they're handling adding, removing, setting up new workstations for their for new employees, or moving around ones that may not be there anymore.
Okay. So the Tier 2 is that administrator that might do more of corporate application servers,
Sure.
things like that.
Yeah.
But you can have those co-located. We just talked about that
Yeah.
in an earlier stage. What would be your determination of, I'm bringing application servers into on-prem versus having somebody else do it?
So that's a two-phase question, I suppose. The two-phase question. On one side, as far as bringing them in-house, you can put them in a co-location. It'll look like it's within your building. You'll have a private line that goes to that co-location, and for all intents and purposes, the nice thing is you don't have to worry about cooling, batteries, maybe generators and things like that on site at your facility, but it'll be like the servers are sitting in there. So if you're in that environment, putting it into a data center scenario will allow you to get all the benefits of the data center, but you don't have to spend all the money to do it. And that's your typical co-location. If those applications, whatever you're hosting, doesn't need that quote-unquote on-prem type equipment, and it can be put in the cloud, it almost always should go into that cloud. I have yet to see a case where it's not going to save costs. Even if it costs a little more to put it in there than to buy your own equipment, you still have to account for, hiring staff or outsourcing the support that keeps that running too. And if it's sitting in the cloud, that's part of that service.
So that's probably a change that's happened in the last 5 years, we'll say, is nothing comes on-prem anymore unless you absolutely have to.
You're correct. The things that are on-prem, you still need switches. You still probably have a firewall.
Okay, so, and that would start, like I have a switch with, 10 of my contractors. I have switches at several, or firewalls at several locations where, we have an outside connection that we just want to make sure that we have our little sandbox. Even though there's really no servers yet, we have everything on cloud storage and everything, and applications on, we don't have anything on, on co-location. But, you get the firewall, you don't even need networks anymore. It's all wireless, right?
To a lot of degree, yes. Yep.
Yeah. So, a virtual, and I've heard people say all you need is a 5G internet phone that goes into, phone connection for your computer, and you don't even need a switch and a network or a firewall anymore.
To some degree, you could do that.
Some degree.
You're going to have a firewall that's on your machine. Depending on what you're doing with 5G, you can still put a hardware firewall in between that and your cell connection that you're doing. Few people, I think, use cell technology that way, mostly due to the cost of transfers, as far as what it would cost you to move a lot of data. So that's usually I'm traveling and I need connections and whatnot, so you'll do that.
So you might have both of those. You might have a local connection.
Yeah, I mean, everybody has a cell phone. You can make a hotspot if you need to at an airport and make a connection.
Yeah. So at what size, and now we talked about tier 2, which is network admins, when you need to have your own machine, whether it's co-located or on-prem, somebody to manage those applications, because it would be full-time if somebody from your staff did it, and it would cost more than hiring somebody full-time, right?
Sure.
But it's almost like you would say, if I just hire one person, it makes more sense for me to outsource it and managed service provider, because that one person would have to work around the clock, right? If something went down in the middle of the night there, but you have a staff that's on call.
Correct.
And a managed service provider can offer that service. So it's almost like you're still going to need a managed service provider for that round-the-clock support, even if you hired your first administrative person.
And what we find is owners of companies, you will have turnover, right? The first time you have that sysadmin or that network person leave, is probably the last time you want to deal with trying to go find somebody else and train them up to speed and stuff. So while we're going to charge more for a tier 1 person to support that network than you would if you hired them, because you don't have our overhead, right? You also don't have to make sure that they stay there and don't disappear and all that kind of stuff. There's other headaches that come with it that we're able to solve. Beyond that, when you're working with us, even on tier 1 or tier 2, we have a whole bunch of staff that have different experiences and different skill sets, and so a lot of the things, if you had somebody in-house, they might have a skill set that goes up into whatever point it is, right? Maybe Cisco's outside of their scope. Maybe they don't know anything about your Veeam backups. In the house with us, we have somebody that knows every piece of that. So while it's the price of one person, there's a whole bunch more skill sets that sit behind that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And the more you talk about it, the more I'm like, why would anybody ever bring in their own staff? But now, if you kept growing, at what size is it just we bring in our own staff? Or do you get to a certain size and you buy a managed service provider?
That'd be an interesting concept. I can tell you customers that I have that are, say, 200 to 500 range, generally have their own tier 1 in-house. And so we're running kind of a hybrid environment where we'll handle the servers. Once they get above that 500 mark, they typically have their own systems administrators that are handling those things, and the only thing that's getting outsourced to us at that point is really the network. So they may have, firewalls and switches and access points. And since the work to do that, if they were to hire somebody, they'd only be using maybe 10 or 20% of their time, and the other 80% the person would be fairly bored.
So the tier 3, you're saying firewalls and stuff, is it between multiple locations they have, is what you're talking about?
Could be.
That infrastructure, the wide area networks?
Yeah, it could be. Could be at one location. Could be just a big company that has one large location and 1,500 employees. And they will outsource that Cisco work to us, but they'll have the servers, the systems administrators, and your tier 1s, your help desk folks. They'll usually pull those in-house.
So is it possible to, even if you have one location, 1,500 employees, to have no Cisco servers there, they're all on your location? Do you do that?
With the
or
servers,
do you go manage some on their locations? Is that how you handle it?
You can do, I'm going to say you can do a mix of that. There's always there's a few caveats with that. We talked about domain controllers at one point in time. I'd probably always have a local domain controller, but I wouldn't necessarily have their file server sitting there. I'd probably put that in the cloud or put that in the data center, depending on what was going on. And it's sort of subjective based on what the requirements of that customer is, or what requirements they have. And they're all different. Every customer is a little bit different. Every customer has a different idea of what they want, and you get to work around those limitations and requirements.
Interesting. So now, and while you were talking, the thing that hit me is, if you're telling every customer, I'm going to put everything in a data center, in a data center, in a data center, the centralization of that, and how much of a risk do I need to think about as a customer with centralization of my data, everything in one place?
Very good question.
Hurricane, volcano, is it all ever gone together?
So backups, and backups. And your backup shouldn't be backing up to the same location where all your equipment is. Depending on the size of your company, we get into what's called disaster recovery, or DR. What are we going to do? If that hurricane comes through, probably not going to hit Colorado Springs, but maybe a plane hits the data center. And what are you going to do? What are the risks associated with having that data there? And if that catastrophic event happens, what do you do as a company? So if you're using whatever backup, we have several backup different programs that we use. But if your backup is backed up to the East Coast and West Coast, and we get hit by a plane, the terrible joke is we probably don't care because we're all gone. But the truth of the matter is you should know where your backups are so you can restore that data, and so you can keep your company going.
So at what size company, do they start to look at that a little more?
As far as backup?
Look at that redundancy and moving locations.
So,
maybe having
the minute you can
two
afford
managed
it,
service providers.
I wouldn't call it two managed service providers is probably not where I'd talk about that one. I would talk about as far as duplicate data centers. And the minute you can afford that and I suppose the question is, what I usually ask folks is, if you were to lose that data, or if it went down, obviously it's not lost, it's backed up somewhere, and you were down for a day or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever it is that it took, how much money are you losing in that process, right? And if you tell me you're losing $1,000 an hour, or $10,000 an hour, or whatever it might be, then the cost of a duplicate site somewhere there becomes pretty negligible. So the question is really, what does the company
value?
Yeah, what's the value of downtime? If you tell me I'm one person and I can take my laptop down to McDonald's, plug in and go, then there's no value in the redundancy whatsoever, as far as to you and what you do. So it's just a risk, and you all companies should have a disaster recovery plan. All companies should have some sort of a risk analysis on what they're doing, just to understand, they may not be able to afford that second data center, and that's okay. What are you risking? What are you risking losing? And as long as you know what that is and you can accept that risk, then okay.
Yeah. So at what size, and I think we had jotted down like 1,000 to 5,000 is a next tier when you might be moving away from a managed service provider?
Yeah, I'd say once you got over 500, you're probably moving away from the managed service provider, except for maybe the network side of it. Beyond that, once again, it depends on what the company does. Let's say they're a defense contractor somewhere, and everything that they do is requires a TS clearance or whatever it is that they're working on. That may require them to hire their own, network admins, along with everything else they have, simply because not a lot of managed service providers are going to have a bunch of folks with TS clearances running around. So.
Gotcha. So it'd be kind of industry specific at that point.
Could be.
And well, this has been a good kind of walkthrough of
Sure.
as you're moving through the different sizes of a company. When are the turning points, and what other things? So if just kind of in wrapping up here, any blanket advice that you'd say, here are my biggest, the people I see that have problems. Here's the most common problem. Maybe fix this.
Backups. Keep your stuff updated always. It's probably the two biggest things that come to mind. we were talking about websites a while ago, and the number one reason why I see a website get hacked out there is it's updated. So then backups is your fallback. You always have a backup of everything you're doing out there. So no matter what happens out there, you have access to your data.
All right. So how would you offer hosting services, other things? Tell us about your services and how somebody would reach out to you.
Springshosting.com. You can also, when you reach out, or get on the website, 719-393-9266. I think I got that right. You can call us, ask us any kind of questions about get your hosting started today.
Yeah. And I've had pretty good luck with it, so we'll plug
we
there
appreciate you
for
as
you. So, and been definitely a pleasure working and having somebody to pick up the phone when I call you. I'm an old-fashioned guy, I guess. I like
Chris.
that a little bit. But thanks for coming on today.
Absolutely.
Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you for listening to New Cyber Frontier. Remember to follow or like our post and circulate each new show to your networks. We keep you informed, bring you the latest news, explore new trends, and find the hottest topics. With New Cyber Frontier, you don't have to be a computer or cybersecurity expert. Just get plugged in. We encourage you to get involved. Tell us what topics interest you and join our mailing lists. You can find us on the web at www.newcyberfrontier.com. That's newcyberfrontier.com. Check out our previous interviews and please let us know if there are any topics that you would like to hear discussed. See you next time on New Cyber Frontier.